Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution.
The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show. And, if you are new to the show, if you haven't heard it before, go check out some of our past episodes in the archives. We've got interviews with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies, ranging from Netflix to Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Axe Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And my guest here today is Eric Dunn. He's the CEO of Quicken, makers of the best-selling personal finance software in the US. And under his leadership, the company has successfully spun off from Intuit, its original owner, and modernized its product suite, leading to significant growth and attracted a majority investment by Aquiline Capital Partners last year. Today, the company provides more than 2 million active users the tools to lead healthier financial lives. Prior to serving as Quicken CEO, he spent more than 20 years at Intuit, where he was employee number 4 and was CFO, who took it into its IPO in 1993. We're going to ask all about that. During his career, Eric has also pursued technology investing as an angel investor and as a partner at Cardinal DC. And of course, this episode is brought to you by my company, Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients referrals and strategic partnerships with Done For You Podcasts and content marketing. You can go learn more at rise25media.com. All right, Eric, such a pleasure to have you here today. And I want to hear about this because, Quicken is a leader in the fintech space. Before that term fintech was even really much of a term. And you were attracted in the mid 80s to go join. Of course, Silicon Valley had a bit of a history at that point.
Yeah.
HP was around, Apple was around, there are other companies around. Doesn't have the history that it did today. What attracted you, especially because you already had your degree from Harvard, you'd already developed a career working at Bain, but what attracted you to throw it all away and risk it, become employee number 4 for this little startup in a basement in Palo Alto, California?
So, cool question. And, there definitely was, a risk element to joining a small startup in 1986. I think when I did my own spreadsheet or paper document, estimating, looking at the pros and cons, I figured there's a 1/3 chance the company would go bankrupt within a year. So they were quite small, and the prospects were uncertain. But at the same time, I was a tech software guy, and I thought this personal computer stuff is really powerful. They're just part of our life, and it's normal now. But at that time, it was revolutionary technology where an individual for a relatively small amount of money could have the computing power that at that time only businesses had access to, and convenient and flexible and and very, very rapidly evolving. So I think part of me saw this, this was the right escalator to get on to. The personal computer industry was in its infancy, but it was pretty clear it had a long run ahead of it. And so I wanted to be involved in it. And having met the founders of Intuit, Scott Cook and Tom Proulx, I thought they were really cool guys. And I wasn't certain the product category, was going to be giant, but it was the right industry and the right people, and it was the right time in my career. My wife had graduated from law school and wasn't dependent on my income, and I thought I'm going to take a risk and lean in and try this out. And so that was the set of factors that influenced my decision.
And of course, not every startup with 3 employees in a basement needs a CFO. So you had kind of a funny conversation with them, convincing them that you could eventually become the CFO, but you'd also help with coding, which sounds like a great entree.
Well, they knew I could code, because even while I was working at Bain, I had moonlighted by writing a couple of pieces of add-ons, first a utility program and then an add-on piece of software so I think I got paid a paltry 17,500 shares of Intuit stock look it up today, for the Quicken transfer utility. even that I did moonlighting laws. So they knew I could code. But I'd been to Harvard Business School. I could be a CFO of a four-person company. I thought that was actually probably more of a stretch for me than doing the technical work. So I said, the CFO job is going to grow over time. The coding job will taper off. And believe it or not, that's how it worked. So I was very successful, with Tom, developing many versions of personal finance software, and then of course successful as the CFO of a emerging public company in 1993 with Morgan Stanley. So.
And I want to ask about that experience, but before we do, in the late 80s, early 90s, the big behemoth out there was Microsoft. And in the early 90s, you found out Microsoft was developing its own personal finance product to compete with you. It must have sent a shiver down your spine. What was that competition like?
I would have to say it was terrifying, but I would say Microsoft was honorable. Mike Maples was kind of our business contact, and Microsoft had reached out to Intuit in 1990 about a licensing arrangement where we would have become Microsoft Quicken, and they would have paid us a $7 a unit royalty on the Windows version, and we could keep doing Mac and DOS. And I think they thought that was a really generous offer. We thought, it was a slow extinction of our company, so we said no. And then we didn't hear from them for a while. What we found out later is that Doug Klunder, who was the original developer of Excel, personally thought it was cool to build a financial product. So he took on the project and started what became Microsoft Money in the fall of 1991. But Mike Maples told Scott, he said, we've been in these business discussions with you. I want to let you know that we've started an internal project to build our own product, which I thought was pretty honorable because they could have snuck up on us. And so that, we were already motivated to develop a Windows version of Quicken, but you can imagine the motivation was even more intense when we knew that Microsoft would be building and releasing a product by the end of the year. So we were in a frantic foot race with Microsoft in 1991 to ship. And at that time, the Comdex trade show was kind of the showcase for new software products. So we knew that Microsoft was going to be showing off Microsoft Money 1.0. And so the absolute deadline was we needed to have a product ready October 14th, 1991 to show at our booth in Comdex. And by gosh, if we didn't have that, and then our customers approved. They voted with their wallets. They bought our product 10 times as much as they bought the Microsoft product, and the company survived.
Do you remember like a moment, like getting your hands on Microsoft Money and like bringing it to the office? Was there any moment like that where you said, "Oh, here it is"? What was that like?
Somebody in our company somehow was a beta user, so we had a beta version of Microsoft Money probably around August, July, or maybe even July of 1991. And I think there were two reactions. One is they had copied everything from our DOS product, even the sound effects of the product. When you recorded a transaction, had been cleverly imitated. So imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but you don't really want to be flattered in that way by Microsoft. So that was one observation. The other was they had done a nice job. I mean, it had fewer features. They didn't have the investment tracking. They didn't have electronic bill pay, but everything else they'd done a really nice job. So we were worried.
And of course, at that time, one of the big kingmakers was Walt Mossberg, writing for the Journal, the Wall Street Journal, and you had a moment where you open up your Wall Street Journal at home, and he actually said that Quicken was the better product.
Right. I would say that was the high point of my life up to that point. Getting Walt Mossberg, as you point out, was the definitive consumer tech judge to say that we were better than Microsoft Money. So we knew we'd been winning in the marketplace because we'd been outselling Microsoft. But having someone as distinguished as Walt say our product is better, that really helped. And so Intuit went on to greatness. And at a time when many other companies competing with Microsoft went on to oblivion. Lotus ended up getting digested by IBM. I don't know what happened. WordPerfect, kind of faded away. I don't know what happened to software publishing. Many companies didn't survive, and we did.
They did, yeah. You ended up taking the company public, your CFO. I imagine at that point in your career, you hadn't taken any other companies public before.
No. I mean, I was a young, inexperienced CFO, and I'd have to thank the board management team of Intuit for having the confidence that in me to not to replace me with somebody more experienced, but we'd done a good job financially. I think during the time I was CFO, we were profitable every single quarter, and we'd grown very strongly. We had clean audits and no lawsuits and no accounting adjustments, and so we'd done a nice job on the business side as well as building great product. And so I think that track record over a period of time gave the board and the management team confidence that as a company we could be successful.
Reflecting on that period of time from being employee number 4 with Intuit in 1986 to going public, much bigger team. How did the culture change? How did the company change during that period of time?
Yeah, Intuit had a great culture at the time, and I like to think some of the things we've done with the culture here at Quicken are an attempt to reproduce the wonderful culture Intuit had as a private company. And it was, I think what was good about it was, like our own company, collegial, fact-based, don't punish mistakes, learn from them, but also press to do well. Press to excel. So be ambitious. So those are some points of the Intuit culture. So we had a very conscious effort just before the IPO at Intuit to try to codify what we thought was good about the Intuit culture in an exercise we called vision, mission, operating values. And so we had an offsite. We closed the company down for the day. We had 400 people at a sports arena in San Jose. We did kind of team kind of ideation and aggregation of ideas, and then ultimately we wrote down what at that time were the 10 core values of the company, and also refined our mission. So that writing it down doesn't guarantee that the culture and the behaviors will persist, but it certainly helps. And returning to Intuit many years later, I could still see those themes enduring in the company and providing goodness, durable goodness in the way the company operated. So there was a very conscious effort to kind of capture a strong, effective, customer-focused culture and make sure it would endure.
I want to ask you about, you've got incredible institutional knowledge at this point, having been with the company, knowing its history, knowing its track record. How do you personally honor that, but at the same time also be open to the changes that happen in the marketplace and being open to keeping the product evolving and changing and up to speed with the market?
One of the things we tried to do in a very focused way at the time of our spinoff from Intuit in 2016 was to make it clear to the employees that we're not Intuit. We're our own company. We're our own company that has benefit of a lot of kind of history and knowledge about what Intuit does that works really well, but we're by no means trying to emulate, ape it, copy it. We want to be our own company, and I like to think we've kept the 65 to 70% of Intuit, which is really good, and then we've layered in another 30 or 35% of our own perspectives and approach, which are better. So am I answering the question? I feel like I might have wandered.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think it's an interesting perspective, for yourself, to having been with the product for as long as you have, and yet at the same time, you seem also very cognizant of the fact that you have to be, in touch with your users, in touch with your customers, and aware of like new wants and needs that the customer base have.
Well, we knew we couldn't keep doing what Intuit had been doing because Intuit had, not really invested in cloud or mobile capabilities for Quicken. It had underinvested in customer care. It had at least on the most important product development team lost touch with with customers. They didn't have the customer contact. And I think it had been a little bit capricious in technology decisions, some of which we undid. One of the things Intuit was great at in the 90s was making everybody in the company talk to customers. And in the 90s, that meant actually answering live tech support calls, which is scary for many people. And lots of people didn't love it. It was easy for me because I wrote the software. It's easy for me to take a tech support call, but hard for other people. So we don't do exactly that. But we did introduce what we call customer empathy for everybody in the company. And we've now found ways to do it with our Bangalore team as well, where you basically do a call with an agent. And the calls increasingly today are using screen share, so you can see what's going on with the customer. But it's an immersive experience, an hour every month for our employees where they're participating in a live interaction with the customer. So that was one of the things that we dug out of the history books of Intuit and kind of breathed new life into that I think has been really valuable. The other thing that I joke that part of the reason Brad Smith, the CEO at the time of Intuit, wanted to spin off Quicken was he was tired of all those customer emails. And a handful of customer emails were, boy, I love Quicken, but a lot more were, wow, I sure wish I could get my Citibank downloads to work. What's wrong with you, lamos? and so, Quicken customers felt very, entitled to just to write an email to Brad Smith, and then they transferred that to me, and so the customers feel very entitled to email me about a problem. And I think I've made progress. I mean, I would say initially it was probably 80-20, a complaint versus praise. And we've probably gotten to 50-50. You'll never get to 20-80 because people are motivated more to contact you when they have a grievance. But it's particularly when you have a team which can respond effectively to the issues the customers raise. It's not a bad thing. And some of the happiest kind of incidents I have is I hear a suggestion from a customer. I mentioned to Jayshree, the product manager, that's a pretty good idea. Could we get into R39? Sure. And then like 3 weeks later, I'm like, we did that. So, and so you close the loop. And, that's not to say that our feature development has to be driven completely randomly by, coincidental customer interactions. But every now and then, just to respond that way, it's good for the team, it's good for the customers, and, it makes the product better. So
how do you as a busy CEO who's got hundreds of employees underneath you, how do you decide what's the right balance of that customer support that you do? Because you could very easily say to an assistant, okay, if we get any email from a customer, you handle it, delete it from my inbox. Like, is it 20 minutes of your week? Is it 2 hours of your week? How do you decide what is the right amount of time you should be devoting to that?
So, when the good news is that most of the time it's manageable. And I probably spend, only a few hours per week on customer emails. We do get letters, sometimes handwritten letters, delivered to the office. So I do have my assistant scan those and write a synopsis because sometimes you'll get a 3-page missive. So reading those would be quite time consuming. But my assistant does a great job of summarizing them. And in some cases, I'll say there's a care issue, and I'll just forward it to the care team. And we have a very good care and care escalation team who can handle them. But in many cases, I can respond myself. So, I think I'm just fortunate. It's a few hours a week. And, if it was 5 times as much, I'd have to have a different process, but it's manageable. And it gives me a lot of insight into what the actual customers are experiencing to get their emails and their handwritten letters and their typed letters. Not typed, probably printed on a computer. Might be a typed letter.
I want to ask you about, now you've spent some time doing venture capital, doing angel investing, and you've said that the spinoff from Intuit of Quicken in 2016 in many ways has been an example of a success for private equity. So what was it about that investment from private equity in 2016 that led it to be a success?
Yeah. I mean, in venture capital, by contrast, what you're hoping is to get funding for a great idea and a great team, which hasn't been developed, and then have it turn into something great. What private equity seems to be good at is finding kind of quirky opportunities with existing business where there's some goodness, but it's kind of intertwined with some cruft. And I would say that was sort of the situation with Quicken. There was some goodness that HIG, our first investors, were aware of: the brand, the installed base, the loyal customer, the reputation. But it was intertwined with a lot of Intuit cruft. And so extracting that was, their piece of alchemy. And part of that was, being willing to pay money to Intuit to break it off, and then to recruit a leader who volunteered, me, to be the leader, and then to make judicious decisions about, how much to invest, and generally very supportive decisions about investing. So the theme I came to HIG with is, this is, a solid product and a solid product category, but Intuit is way underinvested in care and the product development team, and we need to spend another $10 or $15 million a year in care and product development in order to have a product people start to love again. And then when we do that, we can do other important things, such as switching from a license to a subscription model that will make it easier to be a customer and easier for us to run the business, add cloud mobile capabilities, and then kind of move on to next gen PFM that's cloud native. So all that, was kind of envisioned at the time. But before we could get there, we just had to dig ourselves out of a hole. And, part of that was, spending a lot more money than we'd spent in the past. But, it worked. The revenue for this fiscal year will be, 30% higher than the record year in the Intuit years, and maybe 40% higher than it was at the time of the spinoff, which is not lightning growth, but in a category that's 40 years old, having reversed the decline and then growing double-digit revenue, which we have the past couple of years, that's good stuff, and we're happy with those results, and HIG was happy. We had a closing dinner with HIG after the transaction in September, where they said, "You guys know we had like 10 or 15 companies in your portfolio. You were the best performing company in our portfolio, in that particular portfolio, not in the firm ever, but in that fund." And at the same time, the new investors say, "We sure got to deal with that Quicken company. Love it. We're going to make money on that one too." So I feel like we created value for HIG, who had the faith to invest in a spinoff with, disentangling the cruft. And then I think we're going to make money for Aquiline, which believes in the growth story. So we've done some of the repair work. We've built a strong team. We've been successful with our customers, and we have growth ideas that will, turn us into, the next fintech unicorn. I mean, that's where we're headed.
So in the midst of that long list of items you wanted to tackle beginning in 2016, COVID hits in 2020. Yeah. How was that? How did that impact you as a leader? How did it impact the company, and how did it impact the user base?
Well, I'm really happy it happened in 2020 and not in 2018, because we had gotten kind of through the narrows of our passage. We'd improved the product quality. We'd implemented the subscription model, and customers understood that it made sense, and they weren't. We had just launched Simplify, our new cloud finance product. We built really good web and mobile versions of Quicken. So we'd done a lot of the repair work already, and so we had a business that was working. All the gauges on the instrument panel were in the green going into COVID, and then they stayed in the green. There was a little bit of a flickering of the oil pressure, I'd say, in the first couple of weeks when no one knew what was happening and the world was ending. And then what happened to us was people said, "Oh, I'm going to be at home for the next 6 months. I'm going to get my finances in order." And so we actually saw not a huge uptick, but a little bit of an uptick in our business in 2020. So at the time that it happened, it wasn't difficult for our business to continue operating. And we also had, like everybody else in the tech world, embraced, Zoom and Slack and all this stuff, and cloud-based document storage. So our whole company, runs on cloud-based infrastructure. And we realized don't really have to be in the office to do this. So
Yeah.
what we're living with today.
It's funny because I've talked to people at some of those types of companies like Zoom and Slack and stuff like that. And sometimes you hear within those companies that they weren't as set up as other companies that use their products to operate remotely. But it sounds like it wasn't too much of a transition for you.
Yeah, it was easy for us to operate remotely. And we also benefited from building our tech infrastructure from scratch on AWS. So no data centers, none of that stuff. All our back office infrastructure was cloud hosted, including our entire customer care stack. We were one of the early adopters of cloud-based telephony. So everything was virtual, and it was quite easy to operate. It wasn't as fun, but it was easy.
Yeah. As you look at the personal finance software landscape today, without revealing any industry secrets, what keeps you up at night? What worries you?
The biggest worry we have is it's very hard to collect all the data reliably and accurately from all the endpoints that we reach. So, we have over 10,000 financial institutions, banks, brokerages, credit card companies. We have about 10,000 billers. We have credit reports. We have, home values. We have stock quotes. So there's just a lot of endpoints we reach out to, and that's the value that we provide. But that part of our business, I compare to running an airline versus running a water company. You might think it's just pipes like a water company, but it's more like an airline. So, if you're a great day, at United Airline, maybe 85% of your flights are on time. And, a great day at Quicken, 90% of the connectivity sections, work flawlessly. But, there's not enough kind of standardized, well-defined, purpose-built APIs out there to get the kind of reliable 100% consistent downloads that everybody wants. Now, the good news is the industry is changing. We recently migrated, one of our major financial institutions to modern FDX APIs. We're in the process of doing 3 more. And so I think, going forward, it'll get better. But even so, it's the hardest thing we do, reaching out into the real world digitally and collecting the stuff accurately and reliably for millions of customers. It's hard. And I worry that, we'll break it, or they'll break it, or something will go wrong.
We're coming up on I guess, a year anniversary of the Aqualign majority investment. What's on your punch list now compared to what was on? We talked about what was on your punch list in 2016, but what's on your punch list now? What else are you excited to tackle? Yeah.
So first of all, they started from the outset talking growth and growth initiatives, and they said, you got your plan. If you want to spend X dollars in addition to your plan, we're not even going to count that, for reckoning purposes, because we want you to feel, particularly in this first year of our ownership, that you're free to do investment spending. And so that was kind of that was a helpful framing. We're going to them in our next board meeting with a plan for our next fiscal year, which starts October 1, where we're asking them to support 2 additional 6-person teams to take on new stuff. I can't tell you what they're going to be doing, but it's relevant and will make sense. And I think they're going to say, yeah, we believe in you. You've run a good software business, and we want you to take on some additional areas. So in general, they've said, look outward, look in adjacent industries, look at financial services, and find opportunity. And so we probably assess 6 or 8 opportunities, and we pick 2 that I think they're prepared to fund. And so we are already a double-digit growth company, but we'd like to be in the high double digits. And I think to reach the high end of our aspirations, that's how we want to operate as a business. And maybe we'll be a public company again. That would be fun too.
You heard it here first. I want to wrap up. I know we're almost out of time here. The last question I usually ask is about gratitude. So I'm a big fan of expressing gratitude. And if you look around at your peers and contemporaries who've helped you along the way, however you want to define that, you've mentioned some different names here. Who would you want to just thank for being there for you along the way?
I've been fortunate, and so I can thank multiple people, because I have multiple people. I think early on, I'd like to thank, Michael Spence, who was my professor at Harvard Business School and later came to Stanford, who taught a course on entrepreneurship and technology innovation. And I was in an East Coast mindset, and that course made me think, there's something cool going on in Silicon Valley. I want to be part of it. So I always thank him. I want to thank, Scott Cook for adopting me, to his tiny team in the earliest days, and then supporting me through thick and thin. And, I made plenty of mistakes myself, and he supported me and, helped build a great company for him in turn. So that's just been a wonderful relationship. And then later in my career, I had the good fortune to, work through actually two wonderful CEOs, first Bill Campbell and then Brad Smith. And I think the pair of them kind of set me up and said, Eric's done a lot of stuff. He hasn't been a CEO, but we think he could do this with a private equity partner. And so they kind of laid the groundwork, for my taking on this role, which I think has worked out well for our customers and our investors.
Yeah. And what does that meant for you after so many years being involved with the company, stepping into the CEO role over these years?
I think I find that, I had 30 years of training that, equips me to do this. So, it's hard to be a CEO, but the experience that I can draw on makes it easier than others would be. And I think the other thing that sets me up is having a very enjoyable job. I like the fact that our company does something useful. I'm looking on the wall there. We help people lead healthy financial lives. We really do. That's what we do. And, we're making the world better. And it's a good business, and we have a good team, and we have fun doing it. So I consider myself very fortunate to have landed in this spot. So thank you, all those folks who made it possible.
Eric, such a pleasure walking down memory lane and hearing your story. Where can obviously Quicken, people can go check that out. Where can people go to learn more, or where would you direct them to learn more about Quicken?
Quicken.com, simplifymoney.com, both great products. Simplify, cloud only, Quicken desktop and cloud intertwined, and both terrific products.
Eric, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.